The references, this reference right here, this is why we have management internal control processes. It's a requirement, federally mandated. The Army regulation right here specifies the program and outlines it. Let me see if I'm going, no, wrong button. Okay, this is what we're going to talk about. 5-year plan, the 11-2s, the annual statement of assurance, and who submits the annual statement of assurance and who submits the 11-2s and when. These all build on themselves. The 5-year plan tells you who's got to do the 11-2s. The 11-2s work their way into the annual statement of assurance, and then that's what's the final product. The 5-year plan is an internal control evaluation plan. It says when the reviews are over a 5-year period. That's the first one. It's tailored to the assessable unit, and we'll cover a little bit more of that on slide 13. And then it covers a 5-year period. Now that's a continual 5-year period. That on the bottom here it had 12 through 16. Today's is 14 through 18, and I handed out copies of that out to y'all. So that should be on your tables, along with a copy of a blank 11-2. The process that is involved in this is there's a checklist that is used to determine whether or not we have material weaknesses for each program. So every program out there gets evaluated. All programs not listed for your command. Sometimes we have, on a 5-year plan, you'll have items that don't show up on there, that you might own a program like a family assistance program that doesn't show up there that you want evaluated. So that would be the second bullet. And the first bullet is if there's a program on there that doesn't apply to your command. Maybe you don't have a civil affairs individual in there, and so you're not going to evaluate that. So I get the 5-year plan from USARC. I take that, I delete out the stuff that I know doesn't apply, like the aviation, and they have a whole bunch of other stuff in there that doesn't apply to our command. I pull as much of that out as I possibly can, and I put in the stuff that does apply. Now when I send that down to the brigades, they also have to do the same thing. They have to evaluate it and say, hey, some of this doesn't apply, so we're not going to evaluate it. Some of it does. Okay, so your SSAs at the brigade are the ones that are doing that. And then they schedule that over a 5-year period, and that's based on risk. If it's a high-risk area, it gets done every year. So a lot of your G8 functions are high-risk areas, and they get evaluated every year. This is what a 5-year plan. It has the key controls, what areas get evaluated, who does it. On that who, on the handout I gave you, it's the proponent is what I put at the top. And then when it gets done. So you can see that some of these don't get done every year. It just depends on the risk involved. If it's a high-risk area, it's going to get done every year. If it's a medium, it'll get done either 2 to 3 times a year. And if it's a low risk, it'll only get done once a year. So you may or may not have to do an 11-2 for that. Now, on this 5-year plan, every one of these require a 11-2, which is the other form that I handed out. And we'll get into that when we talk about the 11-2s. So if you look at, I think we covered some of that. It's structured to fit your needs, meaning that if it doesn't apply, then you don't do it. And if it does apply, then you do it. And if it's not listed, then it needs to be listed. And I've been adding in stuff for our command as I find it missing. Let me make sure I'm covering. The high-risk areas, we talked about that. And of course, auditors love audit trails. So keep your stuff on file. This right here is the annual statement of assurance for the 807th for this year. Okay. In here, I have listed. This is the document that went up to USARC with General Bugnell's signature on it. I have listed here each of the brigades. Each brigade produced an annual statement of assurance signed by their commander, and I have those on file here. I also have all the staff functions. So I have the chaplain, the family programs, the FDO office, the G1, G2, and all of those, and their 11-2s that they produced. And then the person that signs it that is called the AUM, the Accessible Unit Manager, and that's usually the 06 or 05, but mostly the 06. Now I know some of the brigades are having the battalions produce an annual statement of assurance that they wrap up in their annual statement of assurance, and then they send to me. So this really does affect all of us. I do not require the 11-2s from the brigade to send up to me. I don't want that book to be a file cabinet. I let the brigades maintain their own 11-2s and their own supporting documents. Now, if I get called up from USARC and I need to provide some of that information based on a material weakness, then I will drill down to the brigades, and they will hopefully have that audit trail right there and maintaining their documents and their files. It's an ongoing process. It's done annually. If you provide an 11-2 to your command and you evaluate your area and you find out that there's still a problem, or you find out that there's a problem and you had said that there wasn't, send up a new 11-2. It doesn't have, you can send up an additional one. And that's what I'm talking about when it says keep it current. It's a requirement on an annual basis. Okay, annual basis. You can start it at the beginning of the year, and then you're not stuck during the fiscal year when you don't have any time to do it, when it's due to me. So, and we're going to talk about ways to streamline that because it creates problems. This is the Form 11-2. Every program is required to do one of these. Now, that's all you need is more paperwork and more evaluations that you need to do. We're going to talk about how to do it. This is what I sent out this year for each of the G shops, the G1, and it kept on going. It was a long spreadsheet. It had in it the links. Not all the links worked. And I took off, this is straight from the 5-year plan, but I hid the other years so that they'd only have to focus on what they're required to do for that year. Okay, now the methods. This is, if you look on your handout, okay, the box 1 has the Accessible Unit Manager, and then box 5, it talks about methods of evaluation. And what we don't want to do is recreate the wheel. Okay, you guys are doing command inspections. You're doing a command supply discipline program. You're doing, I don't know how many other checks that inspections that you guys are doing, but I know there's a lot of them. This is where you can get credit for it without having to do another one. At the end of every AR, there's a internal control checklist. So if you don't know what to go in your particular area, if you don't know what to look at, you go to your Army regulation, go to the appendix, and there's a checklist that says whether or not your program is functioning correctly or not. Okay, so that's one way that you can evaluate your program to make sure it's functioning correctly. Another way is an alternative method, which is your existing programs and your checks that you're doing, and you can use that and refer to that as your backup documentation, and it saves you time, so you're not having to redo it. If you don't have a checklist, or it's a new program and you don't have a checklist, or you don't have an inspection of any kind that you're using to validate your program, then you can develop your own checklist. And you have to actually develop it. There's 3 things that need to be met for the criteria for an evaluation. You can use them as long as they cover the access of controls, the testing of controls, and it documents the evaluation. Let me see if I encourage each of you to use your other programs that you're using as backup documentation to validate your program. And then you can record it here on your 11-2 that that's what you're using, and then it saves you time and you're not having to go through and re-evaluate something that you just got done evaluating. Okay? So I encourage it. In the box on here, it's box number 7, I believe, 7A, it talks about how you are validating your process, whether it's a direct observation, a file, a sampling, or other, or simulation. You got your W's, who, what, when, where. That should be in your supporting document for validating your programs. The accessible unit manager, the 06, signs off saying that your program is either functioning good or it's not. He signs off on that. He sends that up to me, and then I review it, and then I submit information to the chief of staff, and then they determine what's going in the annual statement of assurance to that General Bugnell signs. Your annual statement of assurance at each of the brigade levels should be supported with each of those subunits and their 06 signing it. This is box 8A, the outcome of the testing. Okay, if you have a problem in your area, you've identified a problem, then you also identify corrective actions, and that's all put on this 11-2 form. So the commander gets all of these, the ICA gets all of these, he looks at them all, and it helps the commander be able to sign a statement saying that his command is functioning within regulatory requirements and that things are functioning the way they're supposed to. That's what this is all about. So people's heads, well, I'm not going to say heads are on the line, but I am going to say that their signatures are on these papers that are saying that, hey, I'm certifying that my program's running right. Or I'm certifying that it's not running right, and this is what's wrong with it, and this is my corrective action. This is a tool for the commanders to be able to see that things are being done right. And this gets wrapped up into the annual statement of assurance, which is where we're going next. The annual statement of assurance starts out down here at the brigades, and then they come up to us, and we do an annual statement of assurance here, and then we send it up to the USARC. USARC does an annual statement of assurance, and it goes up, and it goes up, and then it gets to Congress and to the President. This is a requirement every year, and it's not going away. It's part of it. Now, The 11.2s feed into the annual statement of assurance, which identify material weaknesses. If a material weakness is identified, then at, say, a brigade level down here, and they send it up to the 807th headquarters, and a material weakness is when you have a problem that you cannot solve at your level and you're asking for help from higher. This is basically what I just said. This is where it goes up through. Whoops. What happened? Okay. The car sends it up. Second Congress, the car has 60 feeder statements. Ours is one of them. For us, we have the brigades that give us feeder statements in the annual statement of assurance. The accessible unit is responsible for providing that's signed by the commander. And then I put on there the date. The third Friday of January is when it's due from our level up to USARC. Now, backwards planning dictates a couple things, and I have another slide here in a few seconds that we'll talk about that. There's three basic parts to an annual statement of assurance. It's the signed memorandum, which is this right here, that goes up. Tab A is how it was conducted, and tab B is the material weakness. The memorandum has to be signed by the commander, it has to have that statement in there, and it has to have an opinion. This is an auditor's opinion, auditor language, unqualified, qualified, and no assurance. When sometimes those are confusing for people. Don't let it be confusing. Reasonable assurance that an unqualified means you're not trying to qualify it. You're good to go. There's no problems. Qualified means that everything is good except for, and then it specifies it. And then no assurance is something that I hope that we'll never see. That's something that raises more than just eyebrows. So we typically, the last 2 years we've done a qualified statement for this command. This is more detail on the tab A on how it was conducted. The 11.2s are what we're using as supported documents on these. And then your 11.2s have supporting documents on how you did your own assessments within your commands. Tab B is material weakness. And this section right here talks about what is a material weakness. Control's not in place, it's not used, or it's not adequate. And if you're reporting a material weakness, you're either reporting it because you can't take care of it at your level, or you want your higher to know that there's a material weakness, that it's something enough that your higher needs to know about it. And tab B just has a list of where it comes from. There's a new training section in the ASOA. And I know you can't read that, and I can't hardly read it on mine either, but what we've got here is they're asking for us to report the training that has gone on in this upper section here. It's what training has gone on for the MICP program. So they want to capture everybody who has been trained in the MICP program, which would be this class here. I can put in some numbers in here for this next year for this. This is where I want to talk about the brigades. I've talked to all the SSAs in the brigades, and they're going to line up some training a class for MICP, and I will come out and give that class, or a TPU soldier who's been trained will come out and give that class to the brigades. So that's how we're going to handle that. This bottom section is additional training, other training courses. And it has within there DTS, GPC, there's a whole bunch of different types of training. Some of them I don't even know what they are. COR training course, P-Boost training, fiscal law training. They're asking for a significant amount of, they're capturing a significant amount of different types of training in this other category here. I've broken it up for the sections, different time frames, March, June, September, and then for the brigades, the 30th of November. So the 30th of November, the brigades should be providing me with their annual statement of assurance, and then they can use the same format for their staffs as well. And that will help them, it'll help me, and it'll help the commanders get a better product and actually have confidence when they sign their annual statement of assurance. So this information is what I briefed. I briefed this information this last year on when they were sent out and status, and I made a couple different columns that showed it. But this year, this is what I'm doing to help get a better product for that. Okay.